The first coffee my wife ever made me had a spoon of salt in it. I drank the whole cup and smiled, and her father shook my hand and gave me his daughter. In 4 years she has salted 11 more, and I know what every one of them meant. I'm Dan, she's Elif. I'm American, she's Turkish. We live in a flat in Istanbul, and I have lost every argument I have ever started. Usually without her raising her voice. Twice without her saying anything at all. She is right about 8 times out of 10. There is a coffee cup in this story. There is a drawer in our bedroom with gold in it that I once suggested we sell. And there is one phone call I made to my own sister that I would pay real money to take back. Stay for the phone call. And there is one small thing she does that I spent 4 years quietly laughing at. Every night she sets our table with one more tea glass than there are people in this house. Nobody is coming. Nobody has ever been coming. At the end of this, I'll tell you why I stopped laughing. It starts at an airport. At 5 in the morning. With one word, I made the mistake of believing. Her mother was landing at 5 in the morning. The night before, I offered to drive. Elif said no. Go back to sleep, it is 1 hour. So I went back to sleep, because that is what no means. I woke up at 6:10 in an empty flat, with the front door not quite shut, and I remember thinking, with genuine pride, that I had respected her wishes. She came back at 7:30 with her mother, 2 suitcases and a bag of bread. She was perfectly friendly. She asked how I slept. She made coffee, and the coffee had a spoon of salt in it, and her mother drank hers normally, which told me the salt was not a family recipe. It was addressed to me, personally. It took me until lunch to ask what I had done. And she put down the knife she was holding. And she looked at me, the way you look at a slow student you still have hope for. And she said, I said no. You were supposed to ask again. Now, I want to be fair to myself here, because I was raised by people who believe that the words coming out of a person's mouth are the words they mean. I told her that. I said, where I come from, if you say no, and I asked again, that is not care, that is pressure. She said, and where I come from, if you only offer once, you did not want to do it. And then she told me something she had never told me. Her mother asked for things, all her life. For money, for time, for a lift to the airport. And every time she asked, the answer arrived with a small speech attached about how difficult it was. So Elif decided, at about 14, that she would rather carry a suitcase down 4 flights of stairs at 4 in the morning than be a person who asks. I did the mature thing. I apologized at length with reasons, which, it turns out, is the one thing in this house that makes it worse. She stopped talking to me for 2 days. Not shouting, not sulking, working. Here is what 2 days of silence looks like in my house. Breakfast on the table. Shirt ironed. Tea poured at the exact moment I sit down. The rubbish taken out before I get to it. Everything a loving wife does, done perfectly, in total silence, by a woman who will not look directly at my face. On the first day I called it manipulation, out loud, to her face. I said, you are punishing me with chores, and she looked at me for about 1.5 seconds and then went back to folding. And that 1.5 seconds is still on my permanent record. On the second day, I decided that if she could do silence, I could do silence. I lasted until about 4 in the afternoon. She lasted the way a mountain lasts. And at some point that afternoon, I realized she was not waiting for me to break. She had not entered a competition. She was just not talking. The strangest part came at dinner on the second night. Not talking, not looking, and she still put out 3 tea glasses for the 2 of us. I remember staring at that third glass and thinking, you are not even speaking to me, and you are still setting a place for a person who does not exist. I broke at 9 on the second night. I asked her what she wanted me to say, and she told me nothing. She said, you think I am punishing you. I am waiting for you to stop explaining. She said, every time you explain, you are telling me why my feeling is a mistake. I do not want a lawyer. I want a husband who is quiet for one day. So I learned to be quiet, badly and about 4 years too late, but I learned. Which made it especially impressive that 11 days later I invited 4 people to our flat at 20 to 10 on a Tuesday night without asking her first. What happened next is the single most impressive thing I have ever watched a human being do. In 4 minutes, that flat went from Tuesday night to a wedding. Tea, fruit, biscuits from a tin I did not know we owned, and a woman in house clothes turning into the finest host in Istanbul, laughing at my colleague's story about the airport. I sat there in my own living room, being congratulated on the flat, on the tea, on my luck. And I took every single one of those compliments personally, which is the part I would like to skip in this story and cannot, because it is the whole point of it. They left at 20 to midnight. I was still glowing. I said that went well, and I meant it. And she picked up 9 glasses in one trip and said nothing until the kitchen door was shut behind us. And in a whisper, because her mother was asleep in the next room, she said, you told 4 men that my time is not mine. She said, you did not ask me. You announced me. She said, I can be a good host with 2 minutes of warning. You gave me none, because you knew I would say yes, and you wanted to be the generous one. The thing about that whisper is that every clause of it was true, and I could feel it being true while she was still saying it. I had not been generous. I had been generous with her. There is a difference, and it costs about 4 hours of somebody else's evening. The next morning the coffee was salted again, and this time I drank it without saying anything, because by then I understood that this cup was not a joke, and it was not really punishment either. It was a sentence. It said, I am still angry, and I am still making you coffee. Both of those are true, and you get to sit with them. For about a week after that, I was waiting for one word. Sorry, not a grand apology. One word, and I would have folded like a deck chair. It did not come on Wednesday. It did not come on Thursday. On Friday at 10 past midnight, she woke me up by putting a bowl on the table in the kitchen. A pomegranate, opened and taken apart by hand, seed by seed, into a bowl, which if you have never done it, takes about 20 minutes and stains your fingers for 2 days. She had done it at midnight on a Friday, in silence. And she put it in front of me and sat down opposite with her chin on her hand. And I said thank you, which is when I found out that in this house, thank you is a small insult. She said, do not thank me. She said, thank you is what you say to a waiter. It means we are 2 separate people, and one of us did the other a favor. She said, eat it. That is the thank you. I want you to understand what actually happened that night, because I did not understand it for another 2 years. She was not refusing to apologize. She had apologized. It took her 20 minutes, and it cost her the skin of her fingers, and I sat there waiting for 2 syllables in English, because that was the only alphabet I could read. She poured me tea after, in my glass, and the 3rd glass stood there empty, in the middle of the night the way it always does. And for once I did not make a joke about it. I saved the joke for 11 days later, in front of her entire family, which is a decision I would like to discuss with the man I was. Here is the joke I made. I told her family, at volume, that my wife is so organized that she has a spreadsheet for our holidays, and that I have never once had to book anything, and that I am, and I quote myself here, the luckiest man in this room. In the taxi home, she asked me to take the photo down, the one I had put online that evening, the two of us at the table, captioned with something I am not going to repeat. I laughed. I said, "You teach statistics. You mark students down for exactly this." She said, "I know. Take it down anyway." So I explained probability to a woman who teaches probability for about 4 minutes in a taxi, and she let me finish, which I now understand is the most dangerous thing she does. And then she said, "I am not asking you to believe in the eye. I am asking you to stop handing us to strangers so they will tell you that you did well. That is the entire fight, and it has nothing to do with a blue glass eye." She was telling me that I use us as material, that when a room likes me, I pay for it out of her privacy, and that I had done it in front of her mother twice. 3 weeks later, I lost a contract I had been chasing for a year. And I want to be extremely clear about what I did next. Alone, in my own kitchen, like a rational adult from Ohio. I went and found the photo, and I took it down. And then I sat there for a while, feeling much better. She never mentioned it. Not once. Which for a woman with her memory is basically charity. Months later, when I finally admitted it, all she said was, "Now you believe." Not in the eye. In the part where somebody is watching. And then a letter came about my residence permit, and we had to find €4,000 in 9 days. There is a drawer in our bedroom with her wedding gold in it. Thin bracelets given to her at the wedding, one at a time, by aunts and neighbors. And they have been in that drawer for 4 years doing nothing. So on day 3 of 9, I said the sentence. I said, "We could sell the gold and buy it back later." She said no. That was the entire answer. No. And I asked why, and she said no again. And I asked why again, because I am who I am, and she left the room. And I stood there in front of an open drawer full of metal that could solve our problem in an afternoon, being told nothing. The coffee the next morning was salted, and that one I had earned twice. We had the fight that night, and I said the worst thing I have ever said to her, which was, "It is just money, and it is our money." And she said, in the flattest voice I have ever heard from her, "No, it is my money. It is the only money in this house that is mine." And then she said the sentence that ended the argument, which was, "Ask your mother what is hers." And I did, weeks later, on a call, in a roundabout way. And my mother, who has been married for 39 years, thought about it for a long time and then named her car. That was the list. One car. We found the 4,000. What I did not mention, then or for 2 years, is where the last 1,100 of it came from. I sold the guitar. Not a tragedy. I am not good at it, and I had not touched it in a year. But I sold it quietly, from an internet listing, to a student who came to the door on a Sunday, and I told Elif it was a bonus at work. She knew within a week. Of course she knew. She had seen the listing, and she said nothing at all about it for 2 years. And when I asked her why, she said, "Because if I said thank you, you would have made it a gift, and then it would be mine to carry." That is the level she plays at. And 11 days after that, I got on the phone to my sister in Ohio. My sister asked how married life was, and I gave her the tour. The salt in the coffee. The 2 days of silence. The pomegranate at midnight instead of the word sorry. The gold in the drawer that we are apparently not allowed to touch. I did all the voices. I got laughs. It went extremely well. I do not know how long she had been in the doorway, long enough for the pomegranate part. She was holding 2 tea glasses, one in each hand, which she had made while I was explaining to Ohio why my wife is unable to say a simple thank you. I hung up fast, which is its own confession, and she put the glasses down on the table, carefully, both of them, next to the 3rd glass that stands there empty every night of my life. And she asked me one question. She said, "How many times have you told me?" Not told me something, told me, like a story. I said it was just my sister, and she said, "Your sister has never met me." She said, "She has met the wife you describe. And that woman is funny and difficult, and she does not say thank you. I have been that woman in your family for 4 years, and nobody told me." And I said the only true thing I had said all evening. I said, "I was wrong." I said, "I turned you into a story, because a story is easier than learning what you actually mean." Out loud in that room, to her face, at 11 at night. It is the only apology in this entire marriage I have ever got right, and it took me 4 years and a phone call. And then she stopped talking to me again, and this time it was different, and I knew it was different at breakfast, because the coffee was fine. No salt, perfectly normal coffee, made for a guest, and I sat there in my own kitchen holding it, and I would have paid a month's rent for a mouthful of salt. We did not speak properly for 2 days. In the middle of those 2 days, on a Thursday morning, we had an appointment neither of us could move, at a consulate, in front of a man whose job was to decide whether our marriage was real. It was a small room with 2 chairs bolted to the floor and a window with a hole in it. We sat down, still not speaking. I want you to hold on to that. 2 days of silence, and now a stranger with a stamp was going to ask us to prove we were close. He asked how we met. He asked what her mother's name is. He asked which side of the bed I sleep on. He asked, and this is the one that changed the room, why a married couple keeps separate bank accounts. And I answered before she could. I said, because her money is hers. I said it flatly, like a fact about the weather, because by then it was 1. And out of the corner of my eye, I watched my wife turn her head about 2 centimeters and look at the side of my face. Then she took over, the way she takes over everything, with dates. She gave him the year, the month, the name of the street, the number of the flat, and the name of my sister in Ohio, which he had not asked for, and which she delivered directly at me without turning her head. And somewhere in the middle of that, the 2 of us stopped being 2 people who were not speaking and became 2 people being asked to prove something to a man with a rubber stamp. She said one sentence to him I will keep for the rest of my life. She said, "You are asking me to explain my marriage to you in your language." I have been doing that for 4 years. We got the stamp. Outside on the pavement, she still did not speak to me, which I had earned and knew I had earned. But she waited. She stood at the top of the steps with her bag in both hands, and she waited for me to come out. And then she walked home next to me the whole way, on the inside of the pavement, not saying one word. I got home that night with nothing left in me. We had not spoken properly in 2 days. And the table was set the way it is set every night, except this time both glasses were full. Not the pot, not the tray, poured, which meant she had poured them at some point in the last few minutes, and then sat down and waited to hear the key. So I did the only thing I could think of that was not words. I went into the kitchen and I made coffee. Badly. It took me 3 tries and I burned the first one, and she heard every second of it from the other room and did not come in to fix it, which for her is roughly the same as open heart surgery. And then, before I carried it in, I took the salt and I put a spoonful of it into her cup. She looked at the cup, then she looked at me, and she drank all of it, exactly the way I drank hers 4 years ago in her father's living room, without one single change in her face. Then she put the cup down and said the first thing either of us had said in 2 days. She said, "Sit down. It's getting cold." Later that night, she took a red ribbon out of the drawer where the gold is. The same ribbon her father tied on her the morning of our wedding, cut down to the length of her wrist. She tied it onto mine, badly, in a knot I could not undo one-handed, and she did not explain it. I have not taken it off. People keep asking me what I learned about Turkey. Nothing. I learned one thing about myself, and it took 4 years and a phone call I can't take back. Every time I demanded that she explain her logic in my language, in my order, at my speed, I was asking her to be slightly less herself. And I was calling it communication. She had been talking to me the entire time. In salt, in fruit at midnight, in a glass nobody was going to drink from. I was the one who never learned the alphabet. The extra glass is still there every night. I asked her once who it was for, and she told me it is not for anybody. It is so that nobody ever has to be the reason we are one short. I think about that more than I want to admit. So tell me whose side you're on. Mine, when I said we should sell the gold and put it back later. Or hers, when she said no and did not give me a reason. And be honest about it, because I know what I would have said 4 years ago. Next time, Mexico, where her grandmother's stone bowl is older than my entire country, and where I put it in the dishwasher. Subscribe, and I'll see you when the shouting stops.